We'll get started here with 400.02, Introduction to the Glider Pilot Training Course and Private Pilot Training Course. You guys are welcome to turn on your cameras if you want. If you don't turn them on, then I can't tell you, or I can't tell how boring I'm being. So if you want to give me some sort of visual indication so that I can help adjust during the class, then feel free to turn it on and that'll help me out. Otherwise, just raise your hand or put something in the chat when you've got a question, and we'll see how this goes. All right, so I am Captain Luke Towers. This is 400.02, Introduction to GPTC and PPTC. It will be about 40 minutes here. Brief introduction about myself. I was a cadet at 34, Roland J. Groom in Regina, and 703 Optimist in Regina from 2011 to 2016. I did glider in Gimli, Manitoba in 2014. I did my power in Saskatoon in 2015. I'm currently the admin officer at an Army Corps, and I'm also involved with the Moose Jaw Cadet Flying Site. So that's my background there with the cadet flying program. All right. So I haven't practiced with the animations on this. So there might be extra clicking and a little bit of back and forth, but we'll get it figured out. So the teaching points that we're going to be covering here are the selection process, the medical certificate, the glider pilot training course, the private pilot training course, and the CEASE training policy. So when it comes to the selection process, I will paste the link into chat for the actual policy here. So if you want to do a lot of reading, you can do that. But the general process is going to look like the following. So the National Ground School Program, which you're all in right now, is your prep work for the qualifying exam. And the qualifying exam is going to be held around February 1st to 7th next year, 2025. It'll be held on paper, on a computer, depending on what area you're in. From February 8th to 15th, the marks will be sent to the regional cadet support units, and then the RCSU will be sending those marks to the squadrons. The applications will be submitted in Fortress, and then there's a limitation on how many cadets can be submitted in Fortress per squadron to continue on with the rest of the application process. So that will be decided upon at your local level, most likely based on your exam marks and how strong your overall application is. Again, if there are any questions at any point, just feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll assume there's none. Next up from that, there's going to be a file review. So we'll need your school report from June 2024. They'll look at your information in Fortress. So how many regional directed activities you attend, any national directed activities you attend, your attendance for mandatory activities, etc. All that sort of stuff. The interview is probably going to look similar to last year. More information to come, though, likely in the new year. So some key dates for you. So the ground school started on the 3rd of November. It's going to go to the 21st of December. Break for Christmas. Then we'll go from the 5th of January to the 31st of January. As we said before, 1st to 7th of February is going to be the qualifying exam. Then the 8th to the 15th, the marks will be distributed. By the 16th of May, 2025, all copies of the medical certificates are due to the RCSU. So if you are applying for any of the flying training courses and you haven't yet already booked your medical exam or gotten your medical certificate, I would highly recommend that you do that now, basically, because it can take a while. We'll get into it a little bit later, but this is the hard cutoff date. If RCSU doesn't have a copy of your certificate by the 16th of May, you're yes, the CAT 1 is fine. It's higher than requirements. So as you can see, you'll need to submit your report card. So let's see if you can get that ready to go now to make life easier. And your Transport Canada Category 1 or 3 Aviation Medical Certificate. All right. So the number of billets and location of the courses, that varies year over year. So when I took glider, there was 60 cadets in Gimli and about the same in all the different regions. So there was about 360 cadets. I think last year there were only 90 cadets across the country that got on glider, maybe even slightly less than that. So it really depends on the year, based on our training capacity and the number of training locations we have available to us. So glider can be a pretty competitive course to get on. And the operation plan should be released soon. So we should know that information soon, but soon TM. When we know, who knows? So as I was talking about the medical certificate, for the applying for the Transport Canada Aviation Medical Certificate, if you already have a valid one from last year, you don't have to obtain another one as long as your medical circumstances haven't changed. Any new illnesses or medications must be discussed with a civil aviation medical examiner. So that's just something to keep in mind there. To find a medical examiner, I will see if I can put this into chat as well. Give me a second. The handy tool on the Transport Canada website that allows you to search for a medical examiner close to you. And you'll need to find one and then make an appointment with them to get your assessment done. The cost of this is going to be set by the individual examiners themselves, and it can vary between $150 to $450. That's something that you'll have to pay. It's possible that your sponsoring committee might pay for that. Like if you complete your course, your mileage may vary. Like every sponsoring committee is different, but it's worth asking about. I would ask your officer staff about that. If you have any conditions, so all of your conditions, suspected conditions, and medication must be declared by law. There are serious safety, financial, and/or legal consequences for failing to declare. So don't just not declare something because you think it might invalidate your medical, because eventually it will come out and you'll have issues. So be honest and forthright and let them know everything that you think might affect it. And that includes any conditions for which no treatment or medication is prescribed or needed. So visual acuity, if you require vision correction, so glasses or contacts, you have to bring them with you to that examination. Medical certificates do not automatically allow contact lenses if you have both methods. So you have to make sure that you're getting assessed for both. The Transport Canada administrative fee for the aviation medical certificate is a different cost from the initial examination cost, and they will typically send you a letter to invoice you for that cost, and then you have to pay online or something like that, and that letter will come at a later date. So just a heads up, you'll pay for the initial examination, but then you'll also get a letter in the mail telling you that you still have to pay another $55 for it to be actually issued to you. So the reason I said earlier at the start, you need to make sure you're booking that examination as soon as possible, is the uncomplicated medical could take as long as 3 to 6 months, and complicated medicals can impact your ability to attend a flying course this training year, because you can have a lot of follow-ups required back and forth, and that just slows the process down dramatically. So get those medicals done as soon as possible. And even if you don't get selected for a flying course this year, the medical will still be valid for next year. Any questions about the medical certificate? All right. So when you receive it, you need to make sure you sign it. So this is what it looks like. It's this piece of paper. Generally, you will, this is just, yeah, generally you'll fold it and like fold it again so it fits better. But you'll make sure you sign it right there. Make sure it's got all the correct information. If it doesn't have the right information, you need to make sure it gets updated. Important thing to note, don't give the original to anyone. So when your adults or when your officer staff at your squadron are asking for your medical certificate for them to provide it to RCSU, make sure you're not giving them the original. Give them a photocopy, because that medical certificate is yours and you need to make sure that you're taking care of it and you're not losing it. So don't Don't give it away to someone and expect it to come back perfectly safe, So only give out copies and keep the actual one with you because you have to bring it with you to course. And whenever you're flying, you have to have it with you. If you lose it, it's going to take time and money to replace. And if you don't have it on time, well, it's another thing that can disqualify you. So treat it with the importance that it deserves. So even if the certificate is valid, if any new diagnosis or medical conditions or medication needs to be declared to Transport Canada, or your certificate is invalid. Temporary medical conditions will not void the paper certificate, but they will make it temporary invalid. So if you've got broken bones or you're like violently ill, obviously you're not fit to fly at that point, but they're not going to invalidate your certificate for a temporary issue like that. If something has changed at all and you aren't sure how it impacts your status to fly or your medical condition, just contact a civil aviation medical examiner. Brito, what's your question? Do you have a question? Hmm, I'm not sure if I have the ability to unmute it either. Are you able to type it out? Okay. While he's doing that, does anyone else want to try and unmute their mic just to see if it's a problem with the meeting or just a problem with the specific computer? Okay, it looks like other people are having no problem with it, so might just be on your end. Are there any questions from anyone else while we wait for his question? You don't need official copies. You can just photocopy at home. All right, we'll move on. So the glider pilot training course. When I took it, it was called the Glider Pilot Scholarship, but it's the Glider Pilot Training Course now. It's going to be 7 weeks long. There'll be limited locations. Expect to share a room. You usually have roommates when you're on glider. The course itself consists of 49 separate flights. So the first 24 are with an instructor. Then there's a mix of solos and duals. Duals are the flights that you do with an instructor. Overall, you should end the course with about 29 duals and 20 solos. The theory will be done simultaneously to flying. So typically you'll do half day of flying and half day of ground school. Or if you've got bad weather, you'll do your ground school then as well, or you do like ground flying with your instructor. Cadets are responsible to pay to write the written exam required for the glider pilot with Transport Canada. That's about $130. Um, Important to note that you do get a training bonus like every other cadet camp. So you usually are just expected to pay for that exam from your training bonus, which I believe is the $10 a day or $10 a week. I don't remember the exact amounts, but usually the training bonus is enough to cover the cost of the exam. As before, let me know if there's any questions. Onto the private pilot training course. So it's also 7 weeks long. It's limited locations again, but there are more locations in Glider, not located in all provinces though. Typically, the way this course is run is that they are contracted out to civilian flight schools, and then you are put up in accommodations nearby, and then get driven back and forth to the airport and do your classes that way. Typically, you'll fly between 45 to 48 hours, a combination of solo and dual. You have to be able to solo by the 16 hours of dual training. If you take too much longer than that, you might have to be cease training. Your solars will include leaving the aerodrome of departure for practice area, and will also include cross-country flights to at least two other airports. And the total distance flown between those three airports will be at least 150 nautical miles and will take several hours. So that's just a brief overview of what you can expect for the flying for the power. Meanwhile, on glider, the flights that you're doing, you're basically just going up and down right at the aerodrome itself and not going anywhere else. The ground school would be held simultaneously to the flying training, and just like with the gliding, you'll have to pay to write the written exam required for your private pilot license with Transport Canada, which is again approximately $130. Any questions? Blow my nose. Oh, all right. Okay, on to the CEAS training policy for the glider pilot training course. So the glider pilot training course performance standards. If you meet any of these, then you could be subject to cease training and a return to unit. So if you meet any of the course failure criteria, if you demonstrate a lack of aptitude, so you're not able to fly solo, you require more than 6 extra dual flights. If you fail to pass the final flight test, if you fail to the retest of the final flight test, if you achieve unsat, which is unsatisfactory on 4 of your air missions, if you have poor academic performance, so if you fail the TC written exam or the rewrite of the TC written exam, which is the glide exam, if you fail on 3 segment exams or rewrites, those are all things of what could cause you to be subject to cease training, which is basically, we can't help you here anymore, so you got to go back to your unit. You're not finishing this course, sort of deal. Um, the power pilot training course, again, demonstrated lack of aptitude. So if you require more than 50 or 14 hours of dual training to go solo, if you require more than 51 hours to complete the licensing requirements, or if you fail the final flight test, these are all things that could cause you to be subject to cease training. And for the poor academic performance, if you fail the exam or the rewrite, you could be subject to cease training. Some other reasons that could be cause you to cease training, failing to meet the prerequisites of the course, including specified physical limitations. So I would pay attention to those requirements on the selection process page online. When I got selected for glider, the requirements were 200 pounds as a max and like I think 6'3" or something for the height. And when I weighed in upon arrival, I was like 199 pounds. So I almost didn't get to go on glider. It was by the skin of my teeth. So very important that you look at those. And if you're not meeting those requirements now, but you can, if you put the work in, I would start doing the work now. Um, some other reasons that you could have ceased training: voluntary withdrawal from a course. So you lack of motivation or lack applying yourself. If you voluntarily withdraw from a course, you will not be able to reapply in the future years. If you lose your medical status during glider pilot training course or private pilot training course, you might not be able to reapply in future years. Also for disciplinary and misconduct reasons, if your training is ceased for disciplinary reasons, then you may not be able to apply in future years. And just keep that in mind when you are on course, that this is an extremely selective course that very few people get the opportunity to actually participate in. So have fun and relax, yes, but don't let goofing off wreck your opportunity to get to participate in the world of aviation within the cadet program. And repeated cases of air sickness can be grounds for cease training. Any questions from everything that I talked about in this lesson? Yes, Lee.
Hi, so just about the like withdrawal part of it. So like if I can't well like nobody can confirm that they will get in. So like can we just like not plan anything else for the summer then? Because like if we basically did not like if we don't accept the offer, then we would get like it's considered withdrawal or something else.
That's a good question. Let me see here. Where is it here? I'm pretty sure that applies. I'll note this down as a question, but I'm pretty sure that applies. Participation. That applies more so to after you've accepted the course and are on the course and you just decide to leave. If you have other plans and you can't accept the offer of participation, I don't think that that would impact your future opportunities. But I will note that down as another question. And there is a section in the team to submit that as a question too as well. There's a Microsoft form here. Yeah. Any other questions about this content? Yeah, if you withdraw from any flying course, that's going to hurt your chances to get on any flying course in the future. And generally speaking, if you've been accepted on power, you're not likely going to be allowed to apply for glider anyways. If you look at the requirements on the uh, Canada.ca page, one of the requirements is I believe you can't already have a student pilot permit from Transport Canada. So if you were on course for power and then you left, you would already have a student pilot permit, so you wouldn't be able to apply for either course in the future. All right, now we get into the air law. It can be dry, boring stuff, so stick with me. Try to make it interesting where I can. And again, if you've got any questions or if it's confusing, please do stick your hand up or ask the questions in the chat, and I'll do what I can to help answer them. Okay, so the training point or the training points for this class, we're going to be talking about what the definition of an aerodrome is, what are some markings that you'll see at an aerodrome, some aerodrome lighting, marshalling signals, runway markings, and rules of an aerodrome. So any prohibitions. We're talking about important aerodrome features. We're talking about visual signals and the rules of an aerodrome. At the end of the class, you should be able to interpret aerodrome markings, recognize and perform marshalling signals, and recall regulations covered in this lesson. I'm not necessarily expecting you to remember the regulation numbers, just the general rules. And I may interrupt at some points to see if I can find some visual references for the class that are better than what's included in the slideshow by default, because I don't think there's a ton of visual references. So there might be some ad hoc Googling going on, depending on how much time we have. All right, with that, we'll get right into it. So right off the bat, aerodrome definitions. So an aerodrome is defined as any area of land or water designed for the arrival, departure, movement, and servicing of aircraft, and includes buildings, installations, and equipment that are situated there. An airport is any aerodrome in respect of which a certificate is in force. An airport certificate testifies that the airport meets airport certification safety standards. So this is probably something that I've seen on exams and tests before, but an aerodrome is basically anywhere you're going to have the planes on purpose, and an airport is a certified aerodrome. So those are that's the main difference between the two there. The maneuvering area is any part of an aerodrome that's intended for the taking off and landing of aircraft and for the movement of aircraft associated with taking off and landing, which excludes aprons. So maneuvering area is going to be the taxiways, the runways, etc. Aerodrome markings. So these are the regulations that aerodromes have to follow. So if you've got an aerodrome operator has to make sure that when you close the aerodrome permanently, you need to remove all markers and markings so that people don't mistakenly think that your aerodrome is still open when it's not. Other than water aerodromes, you have to install red flags or red cones along the boundary of an unserviceable movement area. So red flags or red cones along the boundary of an unserviceable movement area. Where part or all of a taxiway is closed, the operator shall place a closed marking at each end. This is all fairly common sense stuff, the objective being to keep people safe. If a maneuvering area is closed permanently, the operator must obliterate all markings that indicate the area is open and paint the required markings. So that could be like an X on a runway or something. If a maneuvering area is not suitable for painting, so if it's covered by snow, closed markings may be in the form of conspicuously colored dye or constructed from a conspicuously colored material or product. Basically, again, the point is make it visible and obvious that it's not open. Wind direction indicators. So CAR 301.06, 7.1, unless wind direction can be determined via radio or other means. So if you had like an automated weather system, the operator must install a wind direction indicator that is conspicuous in color and the shape of a truncated cone and visible from an altitude of 1,000 feet and illuminated when the aerodrome is used at night. So this is a windsock. It's what we use for wind direction and speed indications most of the time. And when the aerodrome is closed permanently, the wind indicator shall be removed. Does anyone know what each of these bands indicate? Yes, Ferguson.
Each band indicates 3 knots.
So what would be the wind speed here?
3 knots.
Excellent. All right, certified aerodromes, so airports, will be equipped with a standard wind indicators, typically a windsock, that when dry will indicate as follows. Horizontal when the wind is 15 knots or more, 5 degrees below the horizon when the winds are 10 knots, 30 degrees below the horizon when the winds are 6 knots. Windsocks are conical in shape. The wind blows into the large end and out of the small end. Aerodromes not certified as airports can use non-standard wind indicators. Non-standard windsocks could react differently to wind speed than a standard windsock, though, so it's better if everyone just uses the standard one. Aerodrome lighting. For aerodromes used at night, the sides of a runway shall be indicated by a line of fixed white lights. They look kind of orange in this picture, but they're white. Visible in all directions from an aircraft in flight at a distance of not less than 2 nautical miles. For taxiways, blue lights are blue retroreflective markers. So if you guys have seen road signs at night, when your lights hit those are retroreflective paint. So that's what retroreflective markers means. So for taxiways, blue lights or blue retroreflective markers will be used in the same way, and the distance between 2 taxi lights should be not more than 60 meters or 200 feet. So the colors of the lights on a runway and on a taxiway and the distance between the lights, those are things I've seen tested on before. Where an aerodrome is used at night, the operator of the aerodrome shall indicate an unserviceable portion of the movement area with fixed red lights, red retroreflective markers, or flood lighting. Marshalling signals. Well, at large airports, marshalers are used to provide guidance to pilots when taxiing aircraft on the ground, especially when close to obstacles, such as near gates. Marshalers may have wands to make the signals more visible to pilots. However, in the context of small general aviation, aircrew will frequently use marshalling signals to assist other pilots taxi and park aircraft. We do have our own hand signals in the gliding program that are different from the marshalling signals, but we're not talking about those right now. So some common signals are straight ahead. I believe that looks like this. If anyone knows if I'm doing it wrong, please correct me. It's hard to know exactly from the text, and it's not something I do every day. So the slow down. So the straight ahead is telling the pilot to taxi straight ahead. You want to bend your extended arms at the elbows and move the hands up and down from your chest height to your head. Slow down is moving your extended arms downwards in a patting gesture. Well, it's kind of hard to demonstrate while sitting. Moving hands up and down from your waist to your knees. So affirmative / all clear. It's frequently used in general aviation to let the pilot know that they'll remain clear of an obstacle while taxiing, because it can be difficult to judge the clearance of obstacles from wingtips while taxiing. So you want to raise the right arm to head level and display hand with thumbs up, and keep your left arm at the side of the body. The stop signal tells the pilot to stop taxiing. The signaler will fully extend their arms at a 90-degree angle to the sides and slowly move both arms to above the head until the arms are crossed in an X. So something like this for stop. So the turn signal, that will tell the pilot which direction to turn while they're taxiing, and the signaler is going to point in the desired direction of the turn and signal straight ahead with the other arm. And the rate of signal motion indicates to the pilot the rate of the aircraft turn. So if I want you to go that way, I'm going to go like this. If I want you to go that way, I'm going to go like this. Turn left, turn right. Yep. That's what we just talked about. Cut engine. Bring the right forearm parallel to the shoulders at about neck height. Draw the hand from above the left shoulder to above the right shoulder in a slicing motion across the throat. So, like this, roughly. Okay, on to runway markings. Displaced thresholds. So thresholds are the ends of the runway, but displaced thresholds are obstacles or unserviceable portions of a runway may result in the need for additional clearance during approach. So this is when you'd use a displaced threshold. It can be used for taxi, landing roll, and initial takeoff rolls. You can potentially use them for landing, but it has to be at the pilot's discretion. So a relocated threshold is used if a portion of the runway is closed. It's marked as closed and should not be used by aircraft for any purpose. Runway numbers. In the southern domestic airspace, which is most of the airspace you'll be flying in, it corresponds to the magnetic bearing rounded to the nearest 10 degrees. In the northern domestic airspace, numbers are assigned based on true bearings rounded to the nearest degrees. And then the last zero is omitted, which means that the opposite ends of the runway will be 180 degrees apart. So they'll be reciprocal numbers. Some prohibitions. related to aerodromes. No person shall walk, stand, drive, or park a vehicle or aircraft on the movement area without permission from the operator and appropriate air traffic control or flight service station. Do not tow or park an aircraft at night on an active movement area unless wingtip, tail, and anti-collision lights are displayed. If you don't have those lights, then you can use lights mounted on the tow vehicle and directed at the aircraft. And if you're parked, then those lights could be substituted with lanterns suspended from wingtips, nose, and tail. Do not remove, deface, extinguish, or interfere with any markings or lights that are used for navigation unless permission is given by the operator or air traffic control. Seems fairly obvious. Do not place aerodrome markings at a place that is not an aerodrome. I wouldn't want a plane landing in my backyard, so don't make it confusing. Do not allow pets to be unrestrained at an aerodrome unless permitted by the aerodrome operator. I don't really want to have poodle sushi, so make sure you keep your leash or your pets on a leash and restrained. Do not discharge a firearm at an aerodrome unless permitted by the aerodrome operator. This is all fairly common sense stuff. And smoking or displaying open flame is generally not permitted on an aerodrome. What does a horizontal windsock indicate? Wind speed, wind speed, wind speed. A specific amount of wind speed. Equal to or greater than 15 knots. Yes. That's what a fully horizontal windsock would indicate. What else would it indicate? So it can tell you the speed, but what else can it tell you? The direction, exactly. Excellent. In southern domestic airspace, what would a runway, which is 48 degrees magnetic, be numbered? It would be 05. So it's rounded to the nearest 10 degrees, and then it's only displayed as 2 digits. So it would be 050 or just 05. You won't see any runways higher than 35, right? I can't remember if 36 or 0 is used, but yeah, 05 for the 48. What color lights are placed along the edges of a taxiway? Thanks for that, Lee. Lee says 36 is used, not 00. So we say blue, we see one white. Here, I will put in the chat blue, white. You guys react with a thumbs up to which one you think it is. This is along the edges of a taxiway. Okay, the correct answer is blue. This is a taxiway. White is used along the edges of a runway. Yeah. So if you answered white along the edges of a taxiway, then maybe you're Harrison Ford. You know, because he took off or he landed on a taxiway. But no, runways are white, taxiways are blue. And that's the last confirmation question for this class. Again, this is supposed to be a 40-minute class, but it's pretty straightforward. Could probably take longer in an in-person class when you can do activities, but Is there any questions about the contents of that class, or do you guys want any additional resources before we move on to the next class? So let's see if I can find a decent diagram. Page on marshaling, sure. Here, I'll put some links in the chat for some additional information. This page looks pretty good for talking about all the lights on an airport. Let me see if I can find you guys a resource for the marshaling while you take down notes on this. And let me know when you want me to advance to the next page on the marshaling. Okay, from this diagram I'm looking at, it's looking like the straight ahead is actually like this and not like this. So I will send this link as well. This one goes into a lot more depth than you will need, but yeah, at least it's got useful diagrams. That's an excellent question about the PowerPoint. I will ask that, but I assume that it should be. They are posted. Awesome. Do you have a link, Kurt? Okay, let me see if I can grab one. Okay. General training resources. Let me go back. Okay. Okay, 40104 aerodromes 1. We have top of list lesson plans. I'm not seeing the PowerPoint in there. 4, 5. Oh, cool. There's quizzes. Let me check these out. I am totally going to steal these. Well, distribute them, I guess. Okay. This is Aerodromes 1, so I will copy this link. Here's a link. Nope. Copy it now. Here's a link to a quiz for this lesson if you want to try that. Yeah, I'm not seeing the PowerPoint, so I will ask about that. Post it. The PowerPoints basically just contain the full contents of the lesson plan anyways, so this is what the lesson plan looks like. And the PowerPoint is basically just the contents of this lesson plan put into PowerPoint form. All right, anything else you guys wanted to go over in this class, or extra resources that you want to cover? Any additional questions you have? Let's have another voting on in the chat. Page on lighting. We will move on to the next lesson here. 401.05. Aerodromes Part 2. So the teaching points we're going to go through today, we're going to talk about general operations in the vicinity of an aerodrome, VFR and IFR aircraft operations at uncontrolled aerodromes within an MF area. All sorts of fun acronyms there. The MF reporting procedures before entering a maneuvering area. The MF reporting procedures on arrival. At the end of the class, you should be familiar with the basics of reporting procedures when flying at or near an aerodrome. And as pilots, you'll need to have a keen understanding of aerodrome rules, as they play a critical role in the safety of all. So that's the importance of this class. The reference for this section is Civil Aviation Regulations 602.96. Again, I don't think they'll be testing you on the numbers of the cars, but they're there for your reference, and you can look those up online. So, general operations in the vicinity of an aerodrome. The CAR applies to persons operating VFR or IFR aircraft at or in the vicinity of an aerodrome, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled. VFR, just for anyone who doesn't know, that's visual flight rules, and IFR is instrument flight rules. Before taking off from, landing at, or otherwise operating an aircraft at an aerodrome, the pilot in command of the aircraft shall be satisfied that there is no likelihood of collision with another aircraft or vehicle, and the aerodrome is suitable for the intended operation. Just a quick confirmation question. What's the difference between an aerodrome and an airport? Who?
An airport is an airport certificate, sir.
Exactly. An airport is just a certified aerodrome. The pilot in command of an aircraft operating at or in the vicinity of an aerodrome shall observe aerodrome traffic for the purpose of avoiding a collision, conform to or avoid the pattern of traffic formed by other aircraft in operation, and make all turns to the left when operating within the aerodrome traffic circuit, except where right turns are specified by the minister in the Canada Flight Supplement, CFS. is what it's the acronym is for that, or where otherwise authorized by the appropriate air traffic control unit. Let's see if it, okay, it's clarified in notes here. So this is some additional information for you. It's not going to be tested, but it helps to provide some additional information to the slide. So if you intend to take off or land in an aerodrome and there's already traffic taking off or landing, then you have to fly the same traffic pattern as the rest of the traffic. However, if you're just flying past the aerodrome and do not intend to land, then you should do so in such a way as to avoid the traffic pattern to reduce the risk of collision with other aircraft. It does say that the default is turns to the left, but there are a lot of aerodromes indicated in the CFS that have right-hand circuits. And that could be for many reasons, so terrain or noise abatement. I know at Moose Jaw, the Moose Jaw Municipal Airport, there is, I'm not sure it's an airport actually. At the Moose Jaw Municipal anyways, all of the circuits have to be flown away from the city. So that means that you have right-hand circuits on 1-3 and left-hand circuits on 3-1 or something like that. And then at the base in Moose Jaw, you have to fly all circuits so that you're not overflying the base or the base housing. So those are the kinds of reasons why you might usually have to fly a right-hand circuit instead of a left-hand circuit. And you could also just be told by air traffic control to fly a specific circuit one way or the other, regardless of what it says in the CFS. So it's just something to note that by default, it's to the left, but pay attention to the CFS guide for the particular airport you're operating at, and also the local air traffic control units. All right. So the pilot in command of an aircraft operating at or in the vicinity of an aerodrome shall, where the aerodrome is an airport, comply with any airport operating restrictions specified by the minister in the CFS. So has anyone ever seen a copy of the CFS? The Canada Flight Supplement? We'll be talking about it, we might as well. Let's see if there's a PDF of it. They want an electric copy. Let's see if I can show you at least a page of what it looks like. CFS. Okay. Well, it's a giant book with all of the aerodromes in Canada listed in it, and it gets out of date frequently, so you have to get the new one continually. Anyways, where practicable, land and take off into the wind unless otherwise authorized by the appropriate air traffic control unit, and maintain a continuous listening watch on the appropriate frequency for aerodrome control communications, or if it's not possible and an air traffic control unit is in operation at the aerodrome, keep a watch for such instructions as may be issued by visual means by the air traffic control units, by like light guns or whatnot. The pilot of an aircraft operating at or in the vicinity of an aerodrome shall, some more rules, where the aerodrome is a controlled aerodrome, obtained from the appropriate air traffic control unit, either by radio communication or by visual signal, clearance to taxi, take off from, or land at the aerodrome. And unless otherwise authorized by the appropriate ATC unit, no pilot in command shall operate an aircraft at an altitude of less than 2,000 feet over an aerodrome, except for the purposes of taking off, of landing or taking off. So that could be another question that comes up in the exams, is how high do you have to be above an aerodrome if you're not taking off or landing? Does anyone know that the general altitude that you'll join the circuit at an aerodrome? Who?
Well, it's a bit unfair because I did glider, but in a glider, usually 1,000 AGL.
That's correct. Yeah. So that's why you want to make sure that you're 2,000 feet above, so you're well clear of the traffic pattern. All right. More general operations in the vicinity of an aerodrome. So where it is necessary for the purposes of the operation in which the aircraft is engaged, a pilot in command may operate an aircraft at an altitude of less than 2,000 feet over an aerodrome where it is being operated under these following conditions, and there'll be a lot more on the next page too. So in the service of a police authority, for the purpose of saving human life, for firefighting or air ambulance operations, for the purpose of the administration of the Fisheries Act or the Coastal Fisheries Protection Act, or for the purpose of the administration of the national or provincial parks, for the purpose of flight inspection, for the purpose of aerial application or aerial inspection, for the purpose of highway or city traffic patrol, for the purpose of aerial photography conducted by the holder of an air operator certificate, for the purpose of flight training conducted by the holder of a flight training unit operator certificate. Those are the main reasons why you could operate an aircraft at an altitude of less than 2,000 feet over an aerodrome, regardless of the landing or taking off part of it. Any questions about this? Do you want me to linger on one slide or the other so you can take notes? Going, gone. All right, moving on. So this is now talking about VFR and IFR aircraft operations at uncontrolled aerodromes within an MF area. So confirmation question again, what is VFR and IFR? Well, or Kurt? How do I say your last name?
Visual flight rules and instrumental flight rules or something. I can't remember
Instrument
what the B is.
rules. Yep. Yep, you got it. MF refers to mandatory frequency. So an MF area means an area around an uncontrolled aerodrome for which all traffic shall be on the designated frequency. Normally, the MF area is a circle with a 5 nautical mile radius extending up to 3,000 feet above the aerodrome elevation. And the MF area will be denoted on charts and whatnot. No pilot in command shall operate a VFR or IFR aircraft within an MF area unless the aircraft is equipped with radio communication equipment. So if you're flying Nordo or no radio, you can't be operating in a mandatory frequency area. If you're the pilot command of a VFR or IFR aircraft operating within an MF area, you shall maintain a listening watch on the mandatory frequency specified for use in the MF area. So no switching it to like 92.1, listening to the radio. You got to be listening to the communication. That's the mandatory frequency in that area. The pilot in command of a VFR aircraft that is not equipped with a radio communication equipment may operate the aircraft to or from an uncontrolled aerodrome that lies within an MF area if there's a ground station in operation at the aerodrome and there's prior notice of the pilot in command's intention to operate the aircraft at the aerodrome, and that's been given to the ground station. And when conducting a takeoff, the pilot in command ascertains by visual observation that there is no likelihood of collision with another aircraft or vehicle during takeoff. So basically, look out, use your eyeballs. Am I going to hit something? Don't take off. If I'm not, okay. When approaching for a landing, the aircraft enters the aerodrome traffic circuit from a position that will require it to complete two sides of a rectangular circuit before turning on to the final approach path. So if you wanted to join just straight in on final for an aircraft, for a runway at a mandatory frequency aerodrome, you're not allowed to do that unless you've got a radio. And if you don't have a radio, then you need to be flying at least two of the sides of that rectangle. More reporting procedures before entering the maneuvering area. So the pilot in command of a VFR or IFR aircraft operated at an uncontrolled aerodrome within an MF area shall report its intentions before entering the maneuvering area. And what's the maneuvering area of the aerodrome again? Rito?
Below 2,000 feet above the aerodrome.
No, so we're talking about the maneuvering area of the aerodrome right now, which is on the ground. Who?
Basically any place that the aircraft. So it's the maneuvering area is more specific in the movement area. It's basically like any part that's required for takeoff. So I believe that includes the taxiways and runway.
Yeah, so any part where you're going to be operating the aircraft for the purposes of takeoff or landing. So that's the taxiways, that's the runways. So if you're over here on, like, I would call it, can you guys see my mouse? Maybe if I make it big. You guys see my mouse? Yes, no? Okay, so over here, this is like the ramp area, but then this here is the taxiway on the runway. So the runway and the taxiway, before you go on there, you can see there's, well, hopefully you can see there's a little white line there. Before you'd cross that line onto the taxiway or the runway, you'd make sure that you're announcing your intentions before entering that area. But if you're just moving around on the ramp, you don't necessarily have to. Okay, reporting procedures on arrival. So this is a reference to Civil Aviation Regulation 602.101, and I will never remember that again. I'll just look it up if I have to. The pilot in command of a VFR aircraft arriving at an uncontrolled aerodrome that lies within an MF area, so mandatory frequency area, shall report before entering the MF area, and where circumstances permit, shall do so at least 5 minutes before entering the area, giving the aircraft's position, altitude, and estimated time of landing, and the pilot in command's arrival procedure intentions. So that could look like Moose Jaw Municipal. This is Cessna 172 Golf Yankee Quebec Romeo. I'm 5 minutes to the east, and I will be joining for a left-hand downwind on runway 13, arrival in 5 minutes, something like that. You need to give them where you are. Right. So I needed to say that I was at, let's say, 2,000 feet AGL, or rather, you would report it at an ASL. So let's say 3,900 feet ASL, and the estimated time of landing and your arrival procedure intentions to let everybody know this is where I am, this is when I'm going to be there, this is what I plan to do when I get there. More procedures for on arrival. The pilot in command of a VFR aircraft arriving at an uncontrolled aerodrome that lies within an MF area shall report when joining the aerodrome traffic circuit, giving the aircraft's position in the circuit. So salmon arm traffic, tug 1 crossing overhead from the south to join left downwind runway 32. So you're saying where you are and what's your position in the circuit. You're going to report when you're on the downwind leg, when you're on final, and when you're clear of the surface. So salmon arm traffic, tug 1 is on a left downwind runway 32 once you're on downwind. Then when you're on final, salmon arm traffic, tug 1 is on final for runway 32. And then when you've touched down and you land, then salmon arm traffic, tug 1 is clear of runway 32. Fairly straightforward. Those are the main points you got to hit. When you're joining, where you're joining, when you're on the downwind leg, if applicable, when you're on final, and when you're clear of the surface on which the aircraft has landed. Okay, confirmation questions. What are some things the pilot in command needs to consider before taking off with regards to the aerodrome or whatever? So Lee?
Before, for example, before entering the maneuvering area, you have to report your intentions basically, and then so yeah, that's also maybe just like the other things we covered before, like for example, wind and like choosing which runway, and just like following the regulations of airports if you are taking off at an airport. Guess.
Yeah. So the examples they provide, it's just the really most basic common sense sort of things. It's is the aerodrome suitable for the intended operation? And is there no likelihood of collision with another aircraft or vehicle? But yeah, the stuff you covered was great too. Excellent. List some examples where the pilot in command may operate an aircraft at an altitude of less than 2,000 feet over an aerodrome. Schmaus?
When authorized by the police, or when a life is at stake, or when it is taking part in some sort of air medical stuff like that.
Okay, what are some more ones? If they're conducting law enforcement, yep. Anyone feel free to jump in. We've got 3 of them covered so far.
Did he mention like taking pictures? I forgot what the official term is, but like observance or
Aerial
whatever.
photography.
Area
Yep,
photography. Yeah.
that's one. Flight training, enforcing the Fisheries Act, fishery things. Yep, yep. Some other ones, medical helicopter. Yep, air ambulance. Taking off and landing. Yep, that's an easy one. Aerial inspection. Yep. National or provincial parks. Excellent. I think that's covered pretty much all of them. Yeah, great job, guys. All right, you've entered an uncontrolled aerodrome with a mandatory frequency and have announced your intentions to land. What other mandatory reporting procedures must you follow? Ferguson?
You need to report when you're on downwind, when you're on final, and once you've cleared the landing surface.
Perfect. What's the one other thing right at the start? Rito?
State position.
Yeah, so when you're joining the aerodrome traffic circuit, you give the aircraft's position in the circuit. Perfect. You guys are crushing it, making my job easy. So that was another 40-minute class done in 27 minutes. So once again, are there any questions about any of the topics that we covered in here, or anything that you'd want to dive into further detail with before we move on to the next one? Yeah, well, give altitude, airspeed 5 minutes before entering, and position and your intentions. So no takers for more aerodrome? Right. Do we want another brief intermission of plane pictures before we move on to the next one, or just dive into the next class? Flying aerodrome. Define aerodrome is right at the, just a second here. It was at the beginning of the first aerodrome class here. Let me see if I can pull it up. Sure would be helpful. Aerodrome's 2. Here. Aerodrome's 1. So this is the definition of an aerodrome as well. I'll give you a little bit to copy that down. Any other questions about the aerodromes before we move on to the next class, which is VFR flight conditions? Let me see if I can pull up the quiz for this class that we just did as well and paste it in the chat. 401 aerodromes 2 quiz. Copy link. All right. Not sure if you guys will have access to this, but you know what? I should be able to just copy the link to the form directly. There you go. Okay, so that was a quiz for this class. All right. Okay. Slideshow, play from start. Just powering through. Okay, this is 401.06 VFR flight conditions. It's supposed to be another 40-minute class, but it'll probably take about half an hour. The objective is we're going to discuss the requirements to fly VFR, so visual flight rules. The objective is at the end of the class, you should be able to identify the instruments needed to fly VFR and list VFR weather minima. So the requirements for flying VFR. So we'll dive right in. Teaching points. We're going to cover minimum instruments for day of VFR, the minimum meteorological conditions for VFR flight in controlled airspace, the minimum meteorological conditions for VFR flight in uncontrolled airspace, and special VFR. These minimas are usually tested on, so be sure to take your notes. So no person shall operate a glider in day VFR flight unless it is equipped with the following. So you need an altimeter, you need an airspeed indicator, you need a magnetic compass or a magnetic direction indicator, and a radio communication system adequate to permit two-way communication on the appropriate frequency when the glider is operated within controlled airspace. Minimum visual meteorological conditions for VFR flight in controlled airspace. So no person shall operate an aircraft in VFR flight within controlled airspace unless you're operating the aircraft with visual reference to the surface. So basically you can see the surface. It's not obstructed. It's not foggy. The flight visibility cannot be less than 3 miles. The distance of the aircraft from cloud is not less than 500 feet vertically and 1 mile horizontally. So no cloud surfing in visual flight rules. Bad idea. Yeah, it's a good way to find another airplane and go boom. Where the aircraft is operated within a control zone, when reported, the ground visibility is not less than 3 miles. And except when taking off or landing, the distance of the aircraft from the surface is not less than 500 feet. So when you're in controlled VFR airspace, You have to be 1 statute mile away from the clouds and 500 feet vertically away from the clouds. And you have to be able to see 3 statute miles of visibility during the day and 3 statute miles of visibility at night. In a control zone, you have to be able to be more than 500 feet over the surface, and your ground visibility has to be greater than 3 statute miles at day and night. So typically what that means is if you've got clouds at less than 1,000 feet, are you going to be flying VFR? Yes, Dwell, this is the last class of the night. Any guesses? If you've got clouds at 800 feet? Yeah, you're not going to be flying in that. At least not under visual flight rules. When it comes to uncontrolled airspace, you have to be able to operate with visual reference to the surface, and where the aircraft is operated at or above 1,000 feet AGL. During the day, you have to have flight visibility of at least a mile. During the night, flight visibility is not less than 3 miles. And in either case, the distance of the aircraft from cloud is not less than 500 feet vertically and 2,000 feet horizontally. So that's about half a mile. More requirements for uncontrolled airspace. No person shall operate an aircraft in VFR flight within uncontrolled airspace unless the aircraft is not a helicopter and is operated at less than 1,000 feet. During the day, the way they word these is just, you have to go backwards and forwards. It's very confusing to me, so I'll try to read it out in a less confusing way. But when the aircraft is not a helicopter and it's operated at less than 1,000 feet AGL, the flight visibility has to be at least 2 miles during the day unless you're otherwise authorized in an air operator certificate or a private operator certificate. And during the night, flight visibility is not less than 3 miles. And in either case, the aircraft is operated clear of cloud. So don't go flying through clouds when you're visual flight rules. So here's some little mnemonics for you to remember it easier. So there's 315 for controlled and 125 for uncontrolled, and 2C for uncontrolled under 1,000 feet. So 315 refers to 3 statute miles visibility, 1 statute mile horizontal from cloud, and 500 feet vertically from cloud for controlled. So 315 controlled, 125 uncontrolled over 1,000 feet, which refers to 1 statute miles visibility, 2,000 feet horizontal from cloud, 500 feet vertically from cloud during the day, and 2C in uncontrolled under 1,000 is 2 statute miles visibility, stay clear of cloud during the day. So here's a little chart for you, make it a bit easier. So when you're in controlled airspace of a control zone, your ground visibility has to be greater than or equal to 3 miles. You have to be clear of the cloud by a mile and vertically 500 feet. But this one, see if I can just paste it into the chat. Road. Let me try again. Touch. Upload. Screenshots. Oh, it's not letting me upload it. So there you go. Thank you, Hendren. All right. Do we need to look at this any longer, or are we good? All right. On to special visual flight rules, because they're special. If the weather conditions are less than those necessary to fly in a control zone, pilots can request permission from the control unit to fly special VFR. To operate in special VFR, the pilot in command must request and be authorized. So you can't just assume that you're going to operate in special VFR. You have to ask for special VFR clearance. When the reported ground visibility cannot be less than that 1 mile, the aircraft has to be equipped with appropriate radio communications equipment. So Nordo aircraft are not going to be authorized to fly special VFR. And the aircraft must be operated clear of clouds and with visual reference to the ground at all times. So you can see here in this picture, do you think they're 1 statute mile away from the clouds? No, definitely not. So they definitely do not want to be flying above the clouds or through the clouds. They need to be able to see they need to be clear of the clouds at all times and have the visual reference to the ground at all times. So this would be special VFR if they asked for it. The night special VFR to take off and leave or enter and land in the control zone as well. So you can have it at night if necessary, but you still have to ask for it. Okay, on to the confirmation questions. What are the minimum instrumentation requirements for VFR? We have an altimeter, an airspeed indicator. Man?
Magnetic compass.
Yep, and what else?
A radio communication system.
Yes, when you're operating it within controlled airspace. That is perfect. Somebody mentioned vertical speed indicator. That's not a requirement. It's just something that's helpful for glider pilots. All right, so here's a scenario question for you. You depart an uncontrolled aerodrome and plan to fly to and land at a controlled airport with a Class D control zone. What are the VFR weather minima that you need to complete the flight without requesting special VFR? Who?
Right. So upon departure from the uncontrolled aerodrome, below 1,000 feet, you will need at least 2 miles of flight visibility by day, 3 statute miles of visibility by night. Upon being above 1,000 feet, you still would require 3 statute miles of visibility. Wait, this is day. Wait, no. If it was night, you would still need 3 statute miles of visibility. If it was day, you would only need 1 statute mile of visibility above 1,000 feet. Presuming that there is a terminal control area extension at the around the Class D control zone, you would need in other controlled airspace besides the control zone. And while you're in uncontrolled airspace, you need 2,000 feet, 500 feet separation from clouds. In control zones that are not in the controlled airspace that is not the control zone, you will require 3 statute miles of visibility by day, 3 statute miles of visibility by night. And at least 1 statute mile of separation from clouds and 500 feet vertical separation from clouds. Inside the control zone, you will need 3 statute miles of ground visibility, not flight visibility, and 3 statute miles of ground visibility by night. And you will also need to be above 500 feet when operating.
Excellent. That's perfect. So when you reach that control zone, you'll need not less than 3 miles flight visibility, minimum altitude of 500 feet, and distance from clouds of 1 mile horizontally and 500 feet vertically. So perfect. What are the weather minima to fly in uncontrolled airspace at 1,000 AGL during the day? Man?
The weather conditions would have to be horizontally 2,000 feet from cloud and vertically 500 feet.
And what about the flight visibility?
Oh yeah, flight visibility would have to be 1 mile during the day and 3 miles during the night.
Perfect. And when can pilots request special VFR at night? Man?
To take off and leave or enter and land in a control zone.
Perfect. Yep. When entering a control zone to land or when taking off to leave a control zone. Excellent. And that's all for the VFR weather minimal class as well. It was even shorter. All just mostly numbers and memorization, to be honest. So that is a very fast completion of all the classes for tonight. So up to you guys what you'd like to do. If there's any questions about any of the classes that we've gone over, we can go over them in more depth. Look for more resources online to show you guys. Or if you just have general questions about the application process, about either of the courses, anything like that, feel free to ask me. Any questions about the flying program in general, I'll just open up the floor to you guys. So, Brito?
Can you go back to the SVFR page, sir?
Man?
Yeah, how many lessons were there total today? Because I kind of joined halfway through and I also transferred from the French one earlier too.
There were 4 today, but
4
all
today?
of
All
them
right.
were scheduled to be 40 minutes, and I found that each one was about 15 to 20 minutes.
What was the first one?
The first one was an introduction to the glider pilot training course and the power pilot training course. So we have the time. Was it Brito? Are you done with this page? You good if I jump back to the other one?
Almost finished, sir.
Okay.
And then it went to aerodrome markings, is that correct?
Yep, it went to see what it was called exactly. Aerodromes 1, which was basically the definitions of an aerodrome, the lights, some signal marshaling, and then aerodromes 2, which I think is when you joined.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that's the one I managed to watch. I did it in the Eastern one.
Gotcha.
French. Yeah, thanks.
Fancy. I can barely say hello in French. They won't be using fitness assessments to mark your glider pilot training course application drill.
Just your
Sorry.
cat.
Did you have any other questions? Rudenko?
Can you hear me well?
It's a little bit quiet, but I'll adjust.
Yeah, okay, I'll speak louder then. Can you please go back to the slide about controlled airspace and not controlled airspace? The one, the visual one.
This one?
One before. One before it.
This one?
It was about the clouds. If you're in controlled airspace, you're supposed to fly 500 meters above the ground, right?
500 feet.
Feet, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But what do you do if the clouds are like at that range? Do you fly higher or lower?
You can't fly under visual flight rules if the clouds are lower than, because that's why the requirements are you have to be 500 feet vertically from clouds and 500 feet above the ground. So usually that means the clouds have to be at about 1,000 feet. And so that is when you would have to ask for that special VFR. So that's exactly what that picture demonstrates, is the clouds are definitely not 1,000 feet above the ground in that picture. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Man?
Is there anything really important in the first lesson about the introduction, or is it something that won't matter too much?
It's helpful information to know. I can go back through it. It doesn't really take very long.
Okay, thanks.
Still have an hour and 20 minutes I'm here for anyways. So, I mean, you missed my lovely introduction, so I can repeat that. I was a cadet at 34 and 703, did glider in Gimli 2014, power at Saskatoon 2015. I'm the admin for an Army Corps, but I also fly with the Moose Jaw Cadet Flying Site. I also have probably built the website or a website for all of your units, because I built, I'll show you this. That's that site. Anyways, that's immaterial. Basically, quick introduction for this lesson was we talked about the selection process, the medical certificate, glider pilot training course, power pilot training course, the CEASE training policy. So we talked about the timelines. Some key information to note is that this ground school program is prep for the qualifying exam. Qualifying exam is going to be at the start of February. It's going to be on paper or computer, depending on where you are. Then after the marks are sent to the squadrons will submit applications in Fortress. There's a limitation on how many cadets can be applied per squadron in Fortress, so that'll probably be based on your marks and your performance at the squadron, which ones they pick. We need your school report from June 2024, so if you don't already have that, see about getting that so you're ready to go. They'll look at your Fortress information. I did post in the chat earlier here. Let me see if I can get the link again. I'll link to the full selection process. So definitely take a read through that. It's got some annexes for how the points are assigned. So you can kind of give yourself a rough grading of where you think you'll sit, roughly. If there's 7 people applying for it in your squadron, the competition is going to be tough. We could look at that policy and see exactly how tough it'll be. But if there's only 7 people, period, in your squadron, you're still allowed to. There's no minimum requirement of cadets in a squadron to submit people for. It's just based on the size of the squadron is how many slots they have available. So if you have a squadron like 34 with like 250 cadets, they're probably going to have, I don't know, I'll say at least 3 people that they can submit. But if it's a squadron of 7 cadets, maybe they can only submit 1. Don't quote me on those numbers. Look at the actual policy that I just put in the chat and go off of there. File review. So yeah, they'll look at your school report. They'll look at your Fortress information. They also look at your exam results. The interview is going to be similar to last year. We don't have all the information yet. We got those key dates there. If you don't already have your medical certificate, make sure you get that as soon as possible. And then some other key information with that is make sure you keep the original. Don't give that to anyone. Give people photocopies. They don't have to be certified copies or anything like that, just regular photocopies. But make sure you get that done and booked as soon as possible because it takes a very long time. Brito, what's your question?
Sir, is it possible for there to only be 7 cadets in a squadron?
Yep. I could tell you right now how many squadrons have that few. Let's see here. Data population. There's some units with only 1. See,
One singular cadet?
at least according to their Fortress data. Whether or not they actually prayed like that, it's debatable, but yes. But generally speaking, if you do have like less than 10 cadets, like you're at risk for being shut down. So it's extremely important that you guys do recruiting to help build up those numbers.
All right, and report card is only from June 2024. Is there any report card afterwards too?
I think they're looking for like your full report card for the year from June of 2024.
All right.
Burrito, you have your hand up still?
Is there a specific way cadets with only one? Is it possible for a squadron with only 1 cadet to even parade, or what would you even do in that case? Because if you're only 1 cadet, then how can there be instructors or anything like that?
Usually they're like parade with other units. It can vary quite a lot. Brinkhurst, it can't be a Cat 4 medical for glider, right? Yeah, no, it has to be Cat 3 at least. Yeah, Cat 4 is only for like recreational flying or whatever it's called, with ultralights, I think. Paul, what's your
So
question?
with the report cards, from 2024, if you were say like homeschooled the year before, how would you do that?
Contact your squadron officers about it sooner rather than later. What they need to do is they need to email the staff at RCSU for your region, and then they will kind of work with you guys, whoever's handling your homeschooled stuff, to take a look at what your curriculum is and your assessment reports are from that. I've handled it before in the past, and I was also homeschooled myself, and yeah, you just have to start that process sooner rather than later so that they can ask for the stuff that they need and that you can get it ahead of time. So I would do that basically now.
Okay,
Mention
thank
that
you,
to your
sir.
staff. Yeah.
Because
no worries.
I'm going to school now, but I was homeschooled last year, and that would be my 2024 stuff.
Yep, and you could definitely mention that and see if they'd accept like a more recent official report card as well.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Brito?
What's generally a good mark that's accepted for the ground school program from the report card, sir?
That is, I could not tell you. It's going to be very dependent on the other cadets that you're competing against. We could look at the policy for how much it actually weighs into your overall points. Let's see if I could pull that up. But while I'm doing that, man, what's your question? No question. Okay, Ferguson.
I just didn't understand fully the part about displaced and sorry, 1 second. The part about displaced and relocated thresholds in the first aerodrome lesson. Could you maybe go back to that at some point?
Sure. I don't think the slides were very clear on the differences between them. So let me see if I can just Google some results. Okay, and here for the report cards, take a look at that link. You'll see there that it has education as a section, and then if you get A, B, or C, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so it's just a difference of like a couple points in your overall application. If you've got like, so if you're applying for glider and you got a C, so 60% or 60 to 66, you get 1 point. But if you got a 95 to 100, you get 5 points. So it's a relatively minor part of your overall application, but every point matters. Okay, let me see about the aerodrome. So you said displaced versus relocated thresholds. Is that what you said? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just reading this here. So relocated thresholds are pretty rare. They're mostly used if there's like construction happening and you need to temporarily like shorten the runway sort of deal. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. To answer your question, Drool, RDA refers to regionally directed activity and NDA refers to a nationally directed activity. So a regionally directed activity might be a marksmanship competition, biathlon competition, or a regional expedition if you're in Army cadets, Gliding days are regionally directed activities. And the national directed activity is at the national level. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. So if you look at that link, man, the grade ranges are covered in there for how many points it gets you. I think provincials are still a regionally directed activity. And it won't matter much this year because biathlon isn't happening until like the spring anyways. CTC would be a nationally, or it would either be an NDA or it'd be its own CTC category. Yeah, CTC is separate sections in the staffing. Yeah. And I can open this up and display it on the page. Yeah, so these are your scoring factors. Your attendance at mandatory local activities. These are where your ranges come into play. Your current rank, your regional directed activities. I believe if you click on it or hover over it, yeah, it gives you a definition as well. NDA participation, CTC qualifications, total number of years in the cadet program, your age. This says cadet fitness assessment, but I don't think this has been updated. So I don't think that they'll factor it in, but I will write that down as a question. If I can find where I put the tab with my questions. Will the cadet fitness assessment be a factor there? Cutoff for birthdays, I believe it's September 1st. I would have to look at the National Ground School page again for that. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, 16 years of age by September 1st of the year of activity participation. Next year. Because you have to be at least 16 to get your glider license from Transport Canada. So they can't have you on the course if you can't get your license by the end of the course. Who?
Right. So, just a quick question about RDAs.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned that gliding days might qualify as RDAs. I know that I've been volunteering at the CFS for basically like every weekend at my local CFS. And for my squadron gliding day, I didn't actually take part in that because I was staffing the CFS, so I was doing FAMing. Would that factor in terms of RDAs? Is there some sort of way that they can offset that for participation there? Because I know
So
I have a
Yeah, so what we're supposed to be doing is the attendance of staff cadets is supposed to be tracked at the CFS in Fortress so that you get credit for that. I would say check with your officers to see if they can see those attendance records on your file on Fortress. And if they can't, or if you need more information, check with your CFS staff to see if they can verify that you have been given credit for that in Fortress. I know in Northwest Region, they've been a little bit slow at the regional level about making sure that the people who signed up or showed up for staffing those CFS activities actually get entered into Fortress. So it's definitely worth, doing a little bit of file review of your own file to make sure that you've got credit for everything you attended. That makes
Understood,
sense?
sir.
Okay,
Understood, sir.
awesome. Brito?
Sir, I noticed that there's also points for different ranks.
Yep.
Now, what about acting ranks? Like if you're a drum major, that technically means you're an acting warrant. Does that play any role in it?
It will be just based on your Fortress rank. So if you're not a warrant in Fortress, then you're not a warrant. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Paul?
So with the age requirements for like glider, you said you have to be 16 by the to get the license. But
Yes.
usually the course doesn't go till like September.
Yes. So they just set it for September 1st to give the maximum chance for people, because the way it works, you go on course, you get your student pilot's permit. You don't need your you can get your student pilot permit without being 16, and then you do all the training on the course, and then after the course, after everybody's left basically, and you've done your flight test and it's all great, yeah, you're a glider pilot license now. They still have to complete all the paperwork for that, and they'll be submitting that paperwork behind the scenes for you to actually get your actual license. And that will happen around that September 1 timeframe, which is why they let it be September 1, even if the course technically ends before then. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, yeah, because mine's a couple days before then, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're
thank you,
good.
sir.
Yeah. Because your student pilot permit will still cover you for a few, I don't remember the exact date range, but after completing the course, you can still show up at like a CFS and fly on your student pilot permit. Any other questions about the application process, the course itself, anything related to the Air Cadet flying program, gliding in general, flying in general, cadets in general? ADB refers to Aviation Document Booklet. I don't think I have a copy sitting around here, but it's your license. That's where your license and your medical will go. It looks like a passport. And it's valid photo ID. So you can board planes by showing them your ADB and feel smug. They'll probably just not even pay attention to it, but it's what I did. Any other questions? I'm gonna give it another 3 minutes. And you do both courses, not in the same year, but if you do glider first, you can definitely do power as well, as long as you don't age out before you can finish both. CFS stands for lots of different things. So if you're talking about the reference for airports, then that's the Canada Flight Supplement. But if you're talking about in the cadet flying program, that's a cadet flying site. All right. Maximum height. Let's see, what is that? 190.5 cm, 75 inches. 6'2.5". I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it is the published requirements for the maximum height. So if you don't meet it, you don't meet it. But I know the weight is definitely a big concern. The height can be an issue because of the If you look on screen, the physical limitations are right here. But the height can be an issue because of how much space you have in the gliders and across the entire fleet of gliders, and how many like cushions and spacers you can have to be safe, and whether or not the instructors can see or be able to take control if you're too big. But the nice thing is there's no maximum height for power. So at least you've got that. Any other questions? International Air Cadet Exchange. And wouldn't you know it, they have a lovely website that I happen to have built as well. We'll give one more minute unless there's any other questions that pop up, and then I can let you guys go early. There's no ground school for International Air Cadet Exchange. It's a application process just like glider and power, but there's no specific course that you have to go on. It's just based on the file review and your interviews. Starting my countdown for remainder of questions. It depends on the year and how many slots there are available. So when I took glider in 2014, I believe there was about 300 to 360 cadets across the country who could be taken onto glider. I think last year, though, there was only about 60 to 90 cadets that were able to be taken into glider because there was only 2 training centers open last year. So we're slowly building back up to what we were pre-COVID, but it really depends on what the training opportunities are, or what the training locations and staffing availability is for the year, for how many slots are available for glider that year. It used to be that more people got into glider than power, but in the recent years, it's been easier for us to get power slots than glider slots. Question from you, Brito?
Will there be more glider training centers this year, sir?
I do not know. I would really hope so, but I don't know the answer to that.